Welcome back, everyone, to the Deep Dive. This time, we're going to be diving into Rich Dad, Poor Dad,
Oh, yeah.
this book by Robert Kiyosaki. It's
Classic.
been a bestseller for years now,
Hmm.
and it's really sparked a lot of conversation and debate about personal finance.
Oh,
So
absolutely.
we're going to break down some of the key takeaways in the book,
Yeah.
try to do it in a way that's clear, engaging, and gets you thinking differently about your own personal finances.
Yeah, I think one of the things that makes Rich Dad Poor Dad so interesting is that it really challenges a lot of those traditional ideas we have about money.
Okay.
Like the whole go to school, get a good job, work hard, and you'll be set kind of thing.
Right, right.
Kiyosaki basically says that's not the whole story. He says that financial literacy, that's really the key.
Hmm. So let's break that down a little bit.
Mm.
Kiyosaki talks about his own life as an example, right?
Mhm.
He compares the advice that he got from two different father figures. His own dad, the poor dad,
Yeah.
and then his friend's dad, the rich dad.
Right. So the poor dad kind of represents that traditional thinking, get a good education, find a stable job, save your money. But the rich dad, he had this whole other perspective. He was really focused on the idea of building wealth through assets.
Okay, so instead of just, working for a paycheck, trading your time for money, the rich dad was really all about, having money work for him.
Exactly. And it's interesting, they even had these different views on that, saying the love of money is the root of all evil.
Hmm.
The poor dad totally agreed with that, but the rich dad was like, no, 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 the lack of money, that's the root of all evil.
Wow, that's a pretty big difference right there.
Huge. And, one of the most powerful points that Kiyosaki makes in the book is that our schools, they don't teach us about money.
Yeah, that's true.
I mean, we learn history and math and science, but, you know, managing your finances, investing, building wealth, that's not part of the curriculum.
Yeah.
And he says that's a big reason why, the rich get richer, the poor get poorer, and the middle class just gets stuck with all this debt.
And he actually uses that really fascinating example of this gathering of some of the richest businessmen back in 1923.
Right.
And, these guys, they were super wealthy, but a few years later, a lot of them ended up bankrupt or even worse.
Yeah. It's a reminder that just having money, it doesn't make you financially secure. You really need that financial intelligence to make it work for you.
You got to know what you're doing. Okay, so one of the really core concepts in Rich Dad, Poor Dad, and I think a lot of people probably heard of this, even if they haven't read the book, is the difference between assets and liabilities.
Yeah, this is where things get really interesting.
Yeah.
So Kiyosaki, he defines an asset as something that puts money in your pocket. So think rental income from a property, dividends from stocks, royalties from a book, things like that.
Got it.
And liabilities are things that take money out of your pocket.
Oh, I see. Okay.
So that's your mortgage, your car loans, your credit card debt, all those everyday expenses that can really drain you.
So like, a big house, that's something a lot of people would think of as an asset.
Mm-hmm.
But if it's costing you a fortune every month in mortgage payments and property taxes and all of that, is it really an asset?
Exactly. That's the kind of critical thinking that Kiyosaki wants us to do.
Okay.
He really wants us to, challenge those assumptions we have about money and make decisions that are aligned with our goals.
So he also introduces this idea of the cash flow quadrant.
Yes.
Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Okay. So the cash flow quadrant, it's basically a way of categorizing people based on how they make their income. So you've got employees, self-employed individuals, business owners, and then investors.
Right. So how does this help us understand how to achieve financial freedom?
Okay, so Kiyosaki argues that employees and self-employed people, they're often trading their time for money, right?
Right.
Whereas business owners and investors, they create systems, they have assets that generate income even when they're not directly involved.
So the goal is to move from the left side of the quadrant to the right side.
Yeah, exactly. It's about transitioning from that mindset of, job security to a mindset of financial freedom.
Okay. And, he talks about the rat race too, right?
Yes.
What does he mean by that?
The rat race is that cycle of working hard, paying bills, and never really getting ahead. It's that trap that so many people fall into where they're just constantly chasing their tail.
Yeah.
And he tells this great story, I think you'll remember it, about Mrs. Martin
Right.
and the donkey.
Uh-huh.
It really illustrates how fear can keep us stuck in this cycle.
She desperately needed a raise, but she was too scared to ask her boss.
Yes, just like a donkey that, it won't move forward, even though there's nothing blocking its path. It's just frozen in fear.
Yeah. I mean, that's a great analogy for how fear and self-doubt can just, you know, stop us from achieving what we want to achieve financially and in life.
Absolutely.
So Kiyosaki says we need to take control, right?
Yeah, he says we need to take control of our finances.
Overcome that fear.
And one of his big things is this idea of pay yourself first,
Okay.
which means putting aside some of your income for savings and investments before you pay your bills or buy anything else.
Hmm.
So it's about prioritizing your own financial well-being.
I like that. Okay, so we've covered a lot so far. We've talked about the two dads. We've talked about the importance of financial literacy, the difference between assets and liabilities, that cash flow quadrant, and overcoming fear. Okay, there's a lot to unpack here. But I think we've only just scratched the surface of rich dad, poor dad.
Oh, yeah, we've just begun.
So you're ready to dive a little deeper and see what else we can discover in this book?
Absolutely. Let's
Okay.
do it. So, one of the things Kiyosaki really digs into is this idea of like the 5 key components of financial intelligence. And it's not just, being good at math or anything like that. It's about understanding how money works
Okay.
and using that knowledge to build wealth.
Gotcha. So it's like financial street smarts.
Exactly. So the first component, it's about making more money,
Mm.
but it's not about, just working harder or getting a raise. It's about finding ways to increase your income by creating or acquiring assets that generate cash flow,
Oh,
like
yeah.
rental properties, dividend-paying stocks, maybe even starting a side business that brings in some passive income.
So it's not working harder, it's working smarter.
Exactly. Now, the second component is protecting your money. This is where understanding taxes and legal structures comes in. Kiyosaki says, the rich, they use things like corporations to legally reduce their tax burden,
Okay.
safeguard their assets.
So that's what he means when he talks about, the rich don't play by the same rules.
Right. It's not about breaking the rules. It's about understanding the rules and using them to your advantage.
Gotcha.
Next up, we've got budgeting.
Okay.
This is all about managing those expenses, making sure your money's working for you, not against you.
So that sounds like pretty standard personal finance advice, but I'm guessing Kiyosaki's got a unique take on it.
He does. He's a big believer in pay yourself first, just like we talked about before, putting aside some of your income for savings and investments before you do anything else.
Okay.
It's about shifting that focus from spending to investing,
Right. So what's the fourth component then?
leveraging your money. Now, this one might sound a little counterintuitive
Okay.
because Kiyosaki actually thinks debt can be a powerful tool for building wealth. But he's not talking about racking up credit card debt, of course.
Right.
He's talking about using debt strategically to acquire assets that generate income.
Can you give an example? Like, how would someone leverage debt to buy an income-generating asset?
Sure. Imagine you take out a mortgage to buy a rental property.
Okay.
Right. You use that rental income to cover the mortgage payments, and over time, the property value goes up. You've basically used debt to acquire an asset that's both making you money and building equity.
I see. So it's about using debt wisely, making sure it's working for you.
Exactly. And finally, the fifth component, it's all about improving your financial information. Staying informed, always learning, expanding your knowledge about money, investing, and business.
Okay.
Kiyosaki's a big fan of reading books, going to seminars, finding mentors who can guide you.
So lifelong learning when it comes to finances.
He really believes that financial struggle often comes from just not knowing enough about how money works.
Okay.
So you got to educate yourself, seek out that information.
Kiyosaki also talks about the power of business systems.
Oh, yeah. He uses McDonald's as a great example.
Mm.
He points out that McDonald's, they're not successful just because they make the best burgers, right? It's because they have these amazing business systems.
Right.
Think about it. Standardized processes, employee training, really efficient operations.
Right.
That's how they replicate their model all over the world.
So it's not just about having a good product or service. It's about having those systems in place.
Exactly. And he tells a story, kind of the opposite, about his friend, this really talented artist,
Oh, yeah.
inherited a ton of money,
Okay.
but he ended up losing it all. Why? No business sense? He didn't have any systems in place to manage his finances,
Right.
no way to grow his wealth.
That's a good lesson. I
Yeah.
mean, you can have the skills and talent,
Yeah.
but you also need to know how to manage the money.
Exactly. Now, remember that advice Kiyosaki gives, especially to young people, about seeking work for what you can learn, not just for the paycheck.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
He believes that early in your career, it's more important to focus on building skills and getting experience, even if that means taking a job that pays a little less at first, because those skills can pay off big time down the road.
It's about playing the long game.
He even talks about his own career path. Before he was an author, an entrepreneur, he was a ship's officer, a Marine Corps pilot.
Wow.
Those experiences, they might not seem related to finance, but they taught him a lot about leadership, discipline, overcoming challenges.
So he's not just talking the talk, he's watched the walk.
Exactly. And to really illustrate the core principles of Rich Dad, Poor Dad, he tells this story about two water contractors, Ed and Bill.
Oh, yeah. The guy's carrying the water buckets, right?
That's the one. They were both tasked with bringing water from this lake to their village. Ed, he represents that employee mindset. He jumps right in, starts carrying those buckets back and forth, working hard, but limited by his own physical effort, right?
Right.
Bill, on the other hand, he takes a different approach. He spends his time designing and building a pipeline. So he's thinking like an entrepreneur, an investor. It takes more effort up front, but once that pipeline's built, he's got a consistent passive flow of water coming in while Ed's still stuck carrying those buckets.
Wow. I mean, that's such a great analogy for what we've been talking about, right?
Absolutely. Leverage, passive income, building systems that work for you.
And the difference between working for money and having money work for you.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Kiyosaki wants us to think about our own lives,
Yeah.
Are we carrying buckets, or are we building pipelines? Are we trading our time for money, or are we creating assets that generate income even when we're not working?
So big picture, what are the key takeaways from Rich Dad, Poor Dad?
I'd say it challenges us to really question our assumptions about money and wealth. It encourages us to be more financially literate, to understand those assets and liabilities, to build systems that generate passive income.
But it's not just about making a ton of money, right?
No, it's about having the time and resources to do what you love, to live a fulfilling life. It's about freedom.
It's inspiring to think about the possibilities when you're not so worried about money all the time.
Yeah.
But I got to admit, some of the stuff Kiyosaki talks about, the investment strategies, they seem a little, risky.
Yeah, I get it. I mean, he talks about buying real estate with no money down, investing in these high-risk startups.
Right.
It can be a little intimidating.
Yeah.
Remember, we're not saying you have to go out and do all that. This is about understanding the principles, the mindset.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah.
He also talks a lot about, overcoming fear and doubt.
Right. Okay.
Especially when it comes to investing.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. He's got that great analogy, the Texan saying, remember the Alamo.
Right.
But it's not about, glorifying defeat. It's about turning those setbacks into motivation. Learning from your mistakes. He says, failure, it's part of the process. Successful investors, they're the ones who can embrace those failures and learn and grow from them.
He even brings up Colonel Sanders.
Right. Oh, yeah. Rejected over 1,000 times before he found someone to buy his chicken recipe.
Wow.
Talk about persistence. Kiyosaki says, you got to fry your chicken little, meaning, face your fears head on. Don't let that doubt hold you back.
I like that. And he also talks about finding mentors.
Big time. Learning from people who've already achieved what you want to achieve.
Yeah.
Getting advice from experts, going to seminars, always be learning, expanding your knowledge. He even talks about finding a broker who invests the same way you want to invest, because their success is tied to yours.
Right. So it's about building that support network, finding people who can help you on your journey.
Exactly. And you know what else he talks about? Giving back.
Oh, yeah.
He's big on tithing.
Okay.
Donating a portion of your income to charity. He believes it creates this flow of abundance in your life.
It's interesting that he connects generosity with financial abundance.
Yeah, he says it's not about giving to get something back. It's about the act of giving itself.
So as we wrap up our deep dive into Rich Dad, Poor Dad, what's the one thing you really want our listeners to take away from this book?
I think it's the power of shifting your mindset. This book, it's a call to action.
Okay.
Question those old ways of thinking about money and wealth. Take control of your finances. Build a life of freedom and abundance.
I love that. And remember, financial literacy, it's a journey, not a destination.
Right.
There's always more to learn, new ways to grow. So to our listeners, what really resonated with you from Rich Dad, Poor Dad? What's one principle you're going to start applying in your own life today? Remember, even those small changes, they can make a big difference over time. Keep learning, keep exploring, keep building that financial intelligence.
And as you go on that journey, remember, financial freedom, it's not just about the money. It's about having the time and resources to do what you love, to live a life that aligns with your values.
Awesome. Well, thanks for joining us on this deep dive into Rich Dad, Poor Dad. Until next time, keep those minds curious and those wallets growing.